What's up guys, Rogue9 here. As some of you may have seen recently, a Rogue9 Discord member by the name of Simmer created a little operator ranking poll that I helped to share. In this poll, Rainbow Six players were asked to assign each operator a rank, with S rank being the best, followed by A through F ranks. So essentially each operator was graded on a scale from 1 to 7. And what this poll has delivered for us is essentially a ranking of all operators in the game from best to worst, based on the opinions of 1,298 respondents, plus I was able to determine which of the operators divided the player opinions the most. Joining me today to discuss these findings are 4 of the top Rainbow Six Siege analytical commentators. In alphabetical order, we have Cole Ross.
Hey guys.
Get Flanked.
What's up guys, I'm Get Flanked. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me, Rogue.
Gregor.
Hey Rogue, guys. Thanks for having me on.
And Prodigio Pete.
Yeah, hi guys. Thanks for having me on, Rogue.
Welcome guys, thank you for joining me. And to all of the viewers, if you're not familiar with any of these guys, I can highly recommend all of their channels. Links will be in the description below, so go ahead and give those a click when the video's done to get access to some more great Rainbow Six Siege content. Let me start out with a couple of quick limitations to the results we will be sharing with you. All of the data was gathered via a self-report questionnaire, so these aren't actual pick rates, but reported preferences and rankings. In addition to this, we did not have equal numbers of representatives for each player rank. Most respondents were either gold, platinum or unranked, while only 31 were bronze and 11 copper. But with those formalities dealt with, let's now dive straight into the average rankings for all operators from best to worst, as picked by almost 1,300 players of the game. At the top we have 8 operators with an average ranking of A, the second highest rank, and they are Habano, Ella, Bandit, Thermite, Ash, Jaeger, Smoke and Twitch. These names are in order, meaning that Habano is on average the number 1 pick of the 1,300 players who responded to the poll, and Twitch is the number 8 pick. Continuing in this order, we have 18 operators with the rank of B, Zofia in the number 9 spot overall, through to Capcan in the number 26 spot. And then there are 9 C-ranked operators, Blackbeard through Castle, and cutting a lonely figure at the very bottom of the list in the number 36 spot with the only D rank awarded today is our Lord and Saviour Tachanka. Now looking at this list, the thing that strikes me the most is that 5 out of the 8 A-rank operators are 3-speed, taking up positions 1 through 6, with only Thermite elbowing his way in at number 4. What this shows me is that while the community values the operator gadgets, speed and a decent weapon are also very important factors in operator choice, maybe even slightly more important than the gadgets for most players. This theory is further supported by the fact that apart from Mira, Rook and Doc, all of the 1-speed operators fall into the bottom quarter of the rankings. But that's just a sort of general observation that I've had. We can probably come back to that as we discuss the individual operators. Any thoughts on those guys?
If I'm looking at like the top 5, there's nothing really there that surprises me. But once we go below like the top 5, it starts to get there's some surprises to me. First of all, I would say the fact that Thatcher is at 12, that seems a little low for me personally, especially with the traps that we have going on right now. I would have expected Thatcher to be a little bit higher. That's probably the biggest shock. If I'm naming one person on this list that I think is misplaced, I think it's probably Thatcher.
Yeah, I'd go along with that. One thing I think is quite interesting is, for example, Thermite's quite high. And even in the Pro League, you see with Thermite, he's not a must-pick on every map and objective. Say, for example, Chalet. If you're attacking the Snowmobile Garage, he's pretty much, a big pick for that objective. But any other objective on Chalet, you're probably not going to see Thermite as much. So some of this stuff is situational. For example, Castle at the bottom. Again, some maps he is actually quite popular, but more so probably for Pro League teams than people in public games.
Yeah, and of course I'm assuming most of the respondents to this this poll will have been more casual players.
Yeah.
I remember watching a stream of King George when he was playing with Kickstar and some guys, and they were talking about the alleged castle buff that's coming pretty soon. And their general consensus on it was that Castle didn't need it. That Castle was already very, very strong if you knew how to play him. So the poll seems to be not necessarily a reference to go to say what are the best operators in the game. It's not necessarily like a tier list, but it's more, I think, a matter of perception and how people kind of see the operators and the way they interact in the meta, especially Blackbeard and Glaz both being at C ranks. I remember seeing them pretty often in Pro League games. Very, very high picks. Glaz is a little more popular with the Latin American teams, and Blackbeard was a little more popular with the North American ones.
Yeah, I think Glaz was one of those that once he was buffed a while ago, and once they updated his scope, he was extremely powerful, but that's sort of been pared back a bit as well now. I don't think he's quite as powerful as he was before.
And Glaz is one that definitely suffers on console. Depending on how many players that responded to this were playing on console versus PC, I mean, Glaz on console versus Glaz on PC are two completely different operators, in my opinion.
Quite surprised. Dokubi's actually quite high. More higher than I would have expected.
Yeah, likewise. She needs to come down that list a little bit, I think.
And personally as well, I have actually probably out of the 3 operators of the new season, she's probably my favorite as well. So I'm not
Rogue,
surprised she's there for the moment.
What was the ranked ratio for Dokubi? Like the choice ratio?
Yeah, so she was more favored by lower rank. The best rank she got was a 2.2 off of bronze, and then most of them 2.7, gold is 2.5, 2.7 for platinum, and then 3.1 for diamond. So diamond had the lowest opinion for Dokubi.
Okay. And that's on a scale of 1 to 7?
Yep, yeah, where a lower number is better. But I mean, a lot of the conversations I've seen around her since she's been introduced is that her weapons are lackluster and her abilities are not that great either. Okay, hacking into the cameras, that's fine, but the logic bomb itself, I've seen a lot of people not impressed with that. But still, she's ended up quite high on the rank.
Well, the DMI doesn't have an awful lot of recoil, does it? It's pretty accurate, but
yeah, that's true.
I think she might be kind of benefiting from the fact that she is quite new into the meta, and then when an operator's new, they're getting picked all the time, and then there's a perception that perhaps they are more powerful than they reasonably are, but then obviously that will drop off in time as people get used to the operators and what they do. So that could just be that she's benefiting from the fact that she's quite new, but I wouldn't rate her above Thatcher. She's sat there one place above him.
Yeah. Yeah, she's almost close to well, she's very, very close in ranking to Valkyrie, who supposedly she would hard counter.
Yeah. The fact that she's so much higher than Visual is surprising. I mean, just comparing her to Visual's at 24, she's at 11. I don't know. Some people think Visual is useless. I don't think he's useless. I think, like, if I'm journeying out like CCTV on border and I see the visual indication, it slows me down. Like, if nothing else, a good visual just like makes me really uncomfortable and slows me down like crazy. I don't really get affected by Dokubi that much, to be honest with you.
Yeah, when you're trying to push forward, you can never be quite sure whether the room you've just cleared is actually clear. I suppose that's more important with more droning happening at higher player ranks, that Vigil will have more of an impact there.
Yeah, one of the things that slows you down with Vigil is you don't know, just because you've got that marker, you don't even know if he's on your level. He could be he could be above you, or below you, he could be anywhere. So, and yeah, being able to slow down the attackers is a key thing for the defenders to be able to do. So that's where he comes in.
Yeah, I think Vigil's been considerably underrated this season. I don't know if he's going to get like a lot of high-level traffic, but I would have to watch the actual playoffs to get an idea about that. I'm more surprised that he's ranked above IQ, because IQ, especially around Blood Orchid, was getting a lot of playtime, just because now you have to deal with Legion traps, and then Capkin got a rework, and there's so many traps, and IQ is pretty much a hard counter to that. The only situation with her is that she kind of has to like get in a position in order to actually shoot out the traps. But then IQ can also see Vigil through her scanner.
Yeah, she's been helped greatly with this new update as well.
And she has very good guns. She's 3-speed as well.
Nades.
And she's thick.
Quite thick. Ella's pretty thick too. And she's very, very high up on the list, but I don't think that really surprises anybody. I think the only reason that Habano is any higher than Ella is because Habano can breach.
Yeah, that's an interesting comparison, though, Habano to Ella, because whenever I look at Ella, I see zero weakness whatsoever. And whenever I look at Habano, the 20-round mag in her primary is a weakness. I don't know. I mean, I know you guys have dealt with that before. That's something that's extremely frustrating. She's still very good. Obviously, I think she deserves to be number 1 on the list. I don't disagree with that. But it's just crazy to me how strong Ella is right now. Like, even comparing her to Habana, it's like at least Habana has some type of downside.
Yeah. The other issue with Habana is she does have one of the longest long reloads, if that makes sense. So, her quick reload is quite nippy, but if you get caught, bearing in mind that she only has quite a small magazine, if you get caught in that long reload, it's pretty annoying.
And I have the impression that the recoil on her weapon isn't great either. It's not as easy to control as some of the others. Yeah,
compared to other ARs, like compared to Ash. Lots of high rate of fire weapons too, except for Thermite. And I think that there's a general perception about high rate of fire weapons in the game that they're inherently better in the sense that you have one-shot headshots.
Yeah,
and you're firing more bullets, you have more opportunities to get a headshot. Twitch's AR has a pretty considerable amount of recoil too, but the DPS on it is just so good.
It's one of the best
if you're able to mitigate it. Yeah.
Okay, so what we've looked at so far are the average ranking opinions expressed by all of the different groups of players from unranked and copper all the way to diamond. But almost all of the operators received the S rank at least once from each group of the players, but they also received the worst rank of F at least once in 81.3% of all cases. This shows us that individual preferences will vary widely. Some players will absolutely love a certain operator while others will hate him or her. So what we can look at next are the operators for which opinions are split the most, and the most controversial character in this list, where the different player class ranks or the player skill ranks that responded to the poll had the most divergent opinions, was Fuse. He was the number 1 where people didn't agree. A lot of the lower ranks or unranked players ranked him B, for instance, then the mid ranks C, and then platinum and diamond D. Is that something that surprises you at all, or is that maybe something you can see a pattern for?
Well, if you say that rank is proportionate to how long somebody's played the game, so Fuse does tend to be popular with new players because he's kind of easy to use. You don't need to get all your kills with your gun, and then there's that sort of satisfaction when you put a cluster charge on a wall or a ceiling, and then you get those kills.
Click button for a kill.
Yeah, basically, you don't have to pull off a headshot or whatever. So I think that's why he's quite popular, just with new players in general.
And I suppose an explanation for why Fuse still ended up quite far down the list is that most of the respondents to this poll were quite seasoned players. A lot of gold, a lot of platinum, a lot of diamond.
Yeah, Fuse is really situational as well. If you have a good map where you can get above the objective and put the cluster charges down, Chalet, for example, is a good one, then he's quite popular, but he's very situational.
Border, if the enemy team is in the server room, if you can get into Armory and then Fuse from the top, it's very, very difficult to deal with that. But then if you have a Jaeger, then maybe that's not as big of an issue.
I think you can see Fuse start to tick up a little bit, even in Pro League. The fact that he has smokes are really strong right now. We saw Black Dragons use Fuse extremely effective in Season 3 finals. Some of the plays that they were using with them. And I think that the problem that you go through when you start using Fuse, because I was the same way when I first started. Fuse was my go-to. I think still to this day, Fuse has the highest KD for me. But you get away from him because you stop getting as many kills with his gadget. But one of the things, if you're playing with a team, his gadget is just as important for area deniability than it is for getting kills. If you picture like Cafe, top floor, if you're defending bar, you've got the 2 bomb sites there. You can put a cluster charge on the windows over there by, I believe it would be B-bomb, and deny that area, and then you have pretty much a free smoke and drop from Skylight and get a plant off there, and it
forces people to move.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think you could see some more use of Fuse moving forward, but I do think it is one of those things. It kind of sums up Siege perfectly. Like, there's just so much depth to it, and it's hard to really grasp the full potential of a lot of the stuff in this game.
Well, I've definitely got something to say about Fuse. Like, I used to play him a lot. He was definitely one of my go-to characters. And I think that now I play him a lot less because I can't really work with my teammates with him. Like, I love going Habana because you can team up with someone like Thatcher or that. Whereas Fuse, he's really good if you're like solo playing, but not great as a team member. And I think that's maybe why a lot of people, as they get better, might get more coordinated and play him less.
Kuvira was another character that split the opinion quite significantly. She was the number 3 in terms of how different the opinions were. And again, they all followed the same pattern where lower ranked players had a greater value for these characters than the higher ranked players. And I wonder, is that maybe less experienced players getting caught out by Kuvira more? And then thinking that she has a higher value than maybe higher ranked players who are more adept at evading her and detecting her before she can do any damage?
I think that's the case for a lot of your roamers, like your 3-speed roamers, especially Cav. Like, Cav's a really, really good solo queue operator, I would say, especially if you're in lower ranks, because a lot of people just don't really like know how to deal with her, you know?
And also, obviously, she's quite independent. There's not really anyone else you need for your strategy. Your job is to move around and catch people out from behind, really.
Yeah,
I agree with that. And that's probably why she appeals to people who are solo queuing, perhaps playing alone and don't have lots of friends that can come on, because you don't have to think about too much with Kuvira. You go and hide on the other side of the map. And then your job is really just dependent on yourself. You don't have to integrate with what everyone else is doing on your team. Just try and single someone out and get that interrogation off. So I can see why she's popular.
And the whole silent step thing too. Like, I remember Flanked, you were talking in a video pretty recently about how one of the more common mistakes that people make at lower ranks is sprinting a lot. And it's a very natural habit to do when you play a lot of Twitch-based FPS, because you need to move around quickly in order to get kills. But in Siege, you just make so much noise when you're sprinting. And one of the things that I learned when I first started playing the game was just how important sound was. And if you're at a lower rank, usually with an operator like Ella or Jaeger or Bandit, if they're running around, you can tend to catch them coming around a corner pretty easily. But with Kuvira, with the silent step ability, it's just very, very strong.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you can get the interrogation off, especially on a low rank game where people are not working together so much, she could win you the game very quickly.
Yeah, basically.
The biggest problem with Cav is just that if you're playing a team that's working to trade each other out, then you're not going to get an interrogation off. And if you get a Cav,
a lot of things have to happen, right?
Right. Yeah, if you're playing against a team that's working together, if you down an enemy, there should be another one of their teammates really close and to prevent you from getting that interrogation. And if you find yourself in like a 1v3 with Cav and you're having to defend the objective, then all of her ability is gone, and now you're stuck with a pistol that's very good, mind you, and then maybe a shotgun or a SMG that's not very good at all. So she's just not very versatile in my opinion. She's good at tracking down lone wolf attackers, but once you get into the higher ranks, it's just not very common to see that.
That's a good point.
What do you guys think about Mira at 13? I mean, that's not as shocking to me as Thatcher at 12, but it's surprising to me. I'll say that, because I feel like Mira's changed the game so much.
I'm not necessarily surprised that she's ranked higher than other anchors like Rook or Doc. I'm more surprised that she's considered in the quote B range of operators. I thought she'd be a lot higher than that, because she's just so strong. Like, the utility that she brings to the team, she's basically a guaranteed pick on a lot of strategies on a lot of maps.
I think the downside to her is that she's got a low magazine count, and that she's heavy armor as well. Makes her just that touch harder to play, I think. She is very useful though.
I'm kind of surprised about the Rook Doc placement. Rook being just a tad bit higher than Doc. I would have thought Doc would have been a little bit higher. I've seen some people just go off with Doc. He's very, very strong, especially when he boosts himself. It's very difficult to kind of get him out of his perch unless you headshot him.
See, I don't agree with Rook being anywhere as high as that. He's probably one of my favourite operators to use.
Yeah.
He's easy to use. You throw down the armor, your team can't
Hit a
get the
button.
armor. You have an ACOG, but I don't think he should be rated that high.
I'm really surprised that that Kuvira's above Pulse. I would have thought that Pulse would be a lot higher on this list, especially considering his guns are really strong and he can function really well as an intel gathering operator as well as an independent fragger.
As I stare at this list, the more questions I have. You made a good point there with Rook. I mean, just look at Rook is ranked higher than Buck, Jackal, Pulse, and Blackbeard.
Blackbeard,
Echo.
yeah.
Blackbeard
like
and Blackbeard and Glaz are probably the biggest standouts here to me.
Well, the ACOG, I mean, the ACOG is strong. If I look at if I'm playing Doc or Rook, I'm playing because I want an ACOG on defense. That's why I'm playing them, and it's really strong. And you see some people there's dudes I play with who just mastered those skinny angles on objectives. They know what doorway they can get a really skinny angle on, and good luck if you're coming against a Rook or a Doc holding that angle. But yeah, I don't know that I would put them that high.
Or an Echo. I've seen Echo ACOG is a little bit more popular than it used to be. But most people usually run him with the shotgun and the machine pistol. That's what I usually run him with.
Me too. But that's the only reason I can think Rook being that high. Perhaps it is because the ACOG's been taken away from pretty much everyone else. Maybe that is why.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. A lot of the influence here seems to be that speed is one of the major influences, then weapons, and then maybe even third ranked the gadgets overall. Because how effective you can get kills seems to be the most important factor in the rankings. Something else interesting, I noticed that a couple of the trap operators, Frost and Kapkan, were again quite controversial, where lower ranked players had a more favorable opinion of them rather than higher ranked players. And I think that sort of fits into what we've spoken about already, in that they're quite easy to use. You put those traps down, and at lower ranks, people are far more likely to fall for those traps than at higher ranked, where you have more seasoned players who will automatically always look for the frost trap.
I think Capcom would be a lot lower ranked if it hadn't been for the rework. Like especially having 5 of those things is super, super helpful. And it still pretty much brings people down to half health, which that's the difference in a gunfight again. And it also serves as an interesting kind of intel tool too. When it blows up, then you can go, oh, okay, there's someone over here. Legion, I'm not really surprised that he's ranked highest out of the trap-based operators, because he's a really good intel operator because he can see where the traps go off, and he has a lot of them over the course of the game. And they also slow people down, which is very helpful for countering speed. If we're talking about speed, I think that having well-placed traps to counter rushers is very crucial to a good defense. Kind of surprised about Frost and her placement. I thought she'd be like a tad bit higher. But then again, if you just look down,
weapons factor in for her as well, because the SMG is slow firing but powerful. And then the shotgun, which shotguns nowadays is just very, very close quarters. So apart from your traps, I think she's a bit more difficult to get kills with compared to a lot of other defenders.
Yeah, I think Legion's probably, to me, the easiest to use, because you can just throw those traps out anywhere you want, hide them really well.
Yeah.
Capcan, it takes ages to put those 5 traps down. You usually don't have them down before the start of the round. And that's if I've not reinforced anything. So
I think Capcan does a little bit better in close quarters, kind of tightly packed objective rooms.
Yeah.
Especially if you place them like outside of the objective, people are going to be more likely when the timer starts ticking down to kind of like rush in and make a mistake. Because that's the whole thing that a trap is predicated off of, is that the enemy has to make a mistake. And so you're talking about, are people more likely to make mistakes at certain ranks? I think that Capcan is a little bit more punishing for the mistakes, but his utility, once you get to people that are going to be more wary of that sort of thing, is a little bit limited. So I'm not necessarily surprised by Legion being at a higher rank, just because it's more difficult, one, to track down his traps because they're cloaked unless you have an IQ and you can see them, and secondly because he just has so many of them, and his guns are really solid too.
Yeah, enjoy both.
Mute and Blitz were quite controversial as well, and I find that quite interesting. I mean, Mute to me is certainly on maps where you need to lock off certain entry points is one of the most important characters you can get there. I mean, okay, you can substitute him with Bandit to a degree, but other than that, I would have expected him to be quite vital.
Well, the other thing about Mute is that he can also keep Twitch drones from getting into an objective room as easily.
Yep,
you're slowing
Twitch
down
drones
the
directly
attackers.
counter. Yeah, Twitch drones directly counter Bandit.
Mm-hmm.
So what part of the player base
one of the stronger ones
liked and disliked Mute?
I've got that separate.
Because I've seen a lot of like my friends who aren't as skilled definitely get more stressed using them when they try to put the jammers down.
The best ranking that Mute received was from the Copper players that responded. He got a 1.9, and the Diamond players that responded gave him a 3.4, which was the worst ranking.
What I see with newer players is they're trying to use it to stop the attackers finding the bomb site in the
catch drones.
Yeah, and it's probably, I mean, it is about that, but not so much in the prep phase, perhaps, but as the round sort of goes on.
I remember when the game first came out, it was a common meme for people to get mad at the Mute who didn't stop the drones from seeing the objective. And now it's like, if people know the map, you see the reinforcements, like you see you hear people running around, like you know where the site is. That's not an issue. The strength is in countering drones. I think mainly Twitch's drone, and especially
if you've got a mirror.
If you got a Mira, unless you have a Thatcher, then that's going to be a little bit more difficult to deal with. But that's the whole thing about this game, right? Is that it's all predicated off of counters, and how the different attacker and defender operators like interact with each other.
There's something interesting about Mute. In my last video, I had a little bit of footage in the background of the prep phase, setting things up, and then playing around as Mute, and I had a good handful of comments from different people wondering why I was putting down the anti-drone device next to a reinforced wall. So it seems that quite a number of people, I mean, okay, it was funny. A handful, but they didn't even realize that possibly one of the more valuable aspects to that is that you can stop breaches.
Yeah.
His gun is lackluster. Let's just be honest.
Yeah.
I think he could benefit a lot from getting the SMG 11.
SAS shotgun's pretty fun to use, though.
His shotgun is really good. I think it's underused, but I think that the whole thing comes down to what you were saying there, Rogue. There's a misunderstanding of how his gadget can be most used. In my opinion, that's one of the most powerful gadgets in the game. If you play against a good Mute, you know it, and it makes you uncomfortable, and it annoys you the entire time you're trying to attack.
Yeah, I'm a Twitch main, and it's very frustrating. Very frustrating to deal with when it's placed correctly.
I noticed like one thing that comes to mind, like on Cafe, if you're holding trains, say let's say secure area, you'll see a lot of Mutes, people play Mute. They try to, like you said, block off that objective. Like they're trying to keep drones from getting in. Where I've seen Mute used more effectively on that objective is actually upstairs to protect the people who are going to hold upstairs so that they can't open the hatch. You can put a couple Mute jammers around like Cigar Lounge and everything up there, and it really throws the attackers for it really throws them off because they're not used to seeing that, and they want to know where the roamers are before they try and breach up there. And if they can't with their drones, it really slows them down.
Well, I think you guys are right that the top lot are mainly about kills. But it's good to see Habano and Thermite up there, because I think obviously going through reinforced walls is extraordinarily important. So I think I'd love to somehow see some of the other operators, like maybe Mira, that come up because they're powerful in tactical ways rather than just kills. Because definitely the top lot is just all about kills, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, something I mentioned earlier is the speed. Like out of the top 6, 5 of them are 3-speed and have relatively good weapons.
Yeah, it's a real pity not to see the top ones being for their gadget. It's just being for their weapons or their speed or getting kills.
Yeah.
Like personally, Habano's my favorite.
Yeah, I think they're all really good solo queue operators.
Yeah.
If you're looking at those top 5 with the 3 speeds and the good guns, I mean, clearly there's some operators that might necessarily not have the best balance in the game. If you're king for a day, how do you balance that? Do you bring everybody up to their level, or do you bring them down to everybody else's level?
I personally probably would bring them back a bit. I think that's, especially with the 1 kill headshot, I think there's a big challenge in the game because everything is at such close quarters where movement speed suddenly appearing from around a corner and having that instant kill is something that will probably decide most gunfights, and there are just exactly those characters or operators that are good at that, and others will struggle to compete there. And if I had the choice, I would probably slow the pace down a bit more and have more drawn-out gunfights by bringing them all a bit down.
I would probably... I think there's a really, really big disparity in terms of movement speed. I think that, like, if you made the 1-speed operators just a tiny bit faster and the 3-speed operators just a tiny bit slower, then that might do a good thing for just the pacing of the game. I'm talking mainly
as well, yeah.
Yeah, I'm talking mainly from the perspective of somebody who was playing the game relatively inconsistently, but I was playing it. I remember playing it during the closed beta back in the day, and just because the time to kill is just so fast, everybody back then was really inclined to take things really slow, and there are players now who have been playing the game long enough, and they just have good enough aim where it doesn't matter. The speed just really gives them such a big advantage in the fact that they can just whip around corners and then get kills relatively easily. For a game that's supposed to be a tactical shooter, I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing. I'm not necessarily advocating for bringing down the skill gap. I still think that there should be a very clear distinction between people who have worked on aiming enough to get to where they are and vice versa. But it creates this this weird dichotomy where it's like I try to introduce the game to new people and they're not really sure what to do. They're not really sure if they should go around and just not try to overthink it and just go in for kills, or whether or not they should think a little bit more strategy based. I don't know if any of that made any sense. That's just my...
Yeah, I agree with that. I'd like to see the speed redone so that the faster uppers are only just a little bit faster. The slower uppers are only just a little bit slower. Maybe a reduction in rate of fire in some of the high-end weapons, especially Ela and Bandit with those really good weaponry.
Yeah.
I think Ela is going to be nerfed in the next round, right? I've seen some rumors about that.
Yeah.
I think they messed up with just giving her that big mag. Now they're trying to nerf her, but it's so hard to not... To do it around that magazine, I think, is the issue.
I honestly think they should just go cold turkey on it. Doesn't hurt to be transparent about these sorts of things, especially when you have a game as competitive as this.
Yeah, I've seen a big thing from the developers where they said that was the key thing that made that gun unique, and that was what they wanted to keep. So I do wonder if they'll plan to keep it.
In a perfect world, I think that the operator should suit their kit and fill in a very, very particular space. Like, I think Ella with her gadgets, at least when I first started playing her, I was thinking like, oh, okay, so she's kind of this... I like to play her as a sort of a point defense lurker hybrid. Like, I use the bombs to kind of gauge and gather intel on just exactly where people are coming in, right? And then I go around and I flank them. I very rarely engage with people at like medium to long range. But there are people who have just good enough aim where that's not even really an issue, especially when the gun already has a 50-round magazine and it doesn't really have that much recoil, especially for the high fire rate that it has. So I think that maybe if she had more of a close range based kind of gun that had more recoil, and that would sort of incentivize playing at closer quarters, that would make her a little bit less broken, in my opinion.
I think it was one of your videos I was watching where you had some good ideas about how to balance her. I think the 50-round magazine thing is just something unique to her that they wanted to bring into the game that most people looked at and said, combined with the fire rate, that is going to be a problem.
So like, huh?
Yeah, that's going to be a problem.
Why?
But I think Flanked, I think you said, I think it was you, one of your videos where you were saying perhaps you could have to remotely detonate those mines. So you can't just run around on the prep phase and just throw them everywhere and then forget about them. And then when you die, your team still benefits from them. There's more of an onus then on you needing to stay alive to be able to detonate your traps. Was it you? I think it was you. I like that. I really like that.
It would change her playstyle completely. I mean, the problem with the 50-round mag right now is that Ella players play so aggressively. She's kind of like the new Jaeger. You're going to run into an Ella almost every single round, and maybe you kill them, maybe they kill you. I just think that if you changed it to where, in order to get the most out of Ella, you had to play a little conservatively, then that 50-round mag wouldn't be such a huge deal because you wouldn't see it as much. You know what I mean?
I remember seeing Kanto Raketti from Ents was, and he's still is. I mean, he's one of the better roamers in the game. I mean, he's such a good fragger. And the operator that he played all the time back in the day was Jaeger. And then Ella came out, and now he plays Ella a lot. And I'm not necessarily surprised by that.
Dude,
because
I was going to mention that. I think that Jaeger being that high on the list, so he's sixth. I honestly feel he's going to drop down because although he is one of the only defenders, or perhaps the only to have a carbine or an AR, whatever you want to call it, the thing that sort of separated him out was that he had that weapon and that he had the ACOG on there. As you have more operators coming into the game that can frag and have free speed, I think you're going to see Jaeger drop down that list a bit.
For sure. I think the only reason that Jaeger is even still relatively high on that list is the gadget. If the gadgets weren't in the game, then Ella would be able to do everything that Jaeger can do.
I think a reason as well that Ella and Jaeger are so high is because their gadgets are just place them down and leave them, and then you don't have to worry. All you have to do is go around killing people.
Yeah.
There's no need to babysit the gadget or anything. You just chuck them out, done, move on.
One of the things I'm thinking about, we're talking about, Ella being high on this list and wanting a nerf, but Habana's number 1 on this list, and I agree with her being there. But yet at the same time, I don't think she needs a nerf. Like, am I alone in that thought? I personally,
I don't think she needs it either.
Habana needs a nerf.
No, I don't. That's just her unique ability combined with the fact that she has a fairly good secondary.
Yeah, Habana's at the top there, and I wouldn't change a single thing about her because I think our weapons are not overpowered and our gadget's not overpowered, but the two combined are just really nice to play with.
Yeah, I agree.
I'd love to see that balance in other operators.
You think maybe then it was a purposeful choice? Because if the tower map is probably one of the least breachable maps that we have. It's very solid. All the floors are solid. A lot of the walls are solid. Do you think that's something that was maybe chosen because the breaching operators, Hibana, Thermite, and Ash, are all so popular and so high up the opinion ranks that maybe having a map that benefited them less was a choice, or am I just making this up?
That's something I never really thought about until it was brought up. I mean,
no, I think you're onto something. I definitely think you're onto something there. If you look at this list, you've got a combination of all skill levels here, and you've got Buck, close to the middle, maybe a little bit below the average. And I think if you were just asking high skilled players, Buck would be much higher on this list. And
for sure.
I think, to me, when you look at Tower, there's definitely a lack of vertical gameplay. As strange as that sounds, with the way that it's built, just the floors and ceilings aren't very breachable. And I think that's definitely them designing that map to try to cater maybe to the newer player who doesn't see that Buck very often, and when they do, doesn't really know how to handle them.
Yeah, I think probably one of the reasons why Buck is kind of mid or even just below the middle of the pack is just his weapons are so hard to control, so hard to deal with. And again, it brings it back to how easy is it to get kills with this character. And sure, if you have the skill and the map knowledge, you can use that breaching shotgun to make holes that can get you fairly easy kills. But for then sort of mid-tier to lower-tier players with less experience who might not have that map knowledge, they just see a gun that is very hard to control and a shotgun that maybe can put some holes in walls sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
For me, when it comes to Buck, I don't like the fact you have to switch to his secondary. I'd love it if I could still be looking down the sight on my assault rifle and then tap the button to fire the shotgun and still be then able to shoot the actual gun as well. Because usually I'll blow a hole in a wall, the defender turns around and shoots me before I switch back and shoot them. I'd love it to be a bit more seamless.
Yeah.
He's quicker than Sludge, though.
It's kind of funny. Yeah. It's kind of funny that Sludge is ranked higher than Buck, especially considering that Buck, when he gets into a room, he just, switch to the shotgun and then bang, bang, bang relatively quickly to just like go through a whole floor with that.
I'd say for Sludge, it's probably the Mach 11 that's pushing him up.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
I really like his primary rifle as well, though. I like the controllability of it, and I do well with it.
Good damage output.
Yeah.
Sludge is one of those where you look at him and you kind of understand where he's going to fit in almost immediately. Like, okay, this guy can put holes in walls. And, I think, again, when you look at the beginning to even like the silver to the gold player, maybe in gold you start to get into a little bit of vertical gameplay, that's where Buck excels in that vertical, because he can do ceilings or floors, whereas Sludge can only do floors. So that's how I would explain that. He's got better weapons and he's easier to use.
Ying needs a good buff because he's rubbish.
And is that mostly the weapons as well? I mean, okay, the gadget
and gadget, I think.
The LMG is just all over the place.
It's terrible, isn't it?
I don't understand what's up with the recoil pattern on that thing. It's just so random. It's just so hard to use.
Yeah, I think about the DLC card, she was the most underwhelming. It's a real pity because I actually love her gadget and it's a lot of fun to use.
I agree with what you said there about Ying. I'd like to see, the way that I would buff her is I'd like to see a rework of her gadget's effect. First of all, if you throw her gadget into a room, I don't think that the ADS should completely wipe it out of the air. I think the ADS should only impact the individual projectiles that come out of it, similar to a cluster charge. And I know if you use it as a cluster charge, then that's how it'll work. But for one ADS to be able to completely take out Ying's gadgets is a bit much, in my opinion. The other thing is, I agree with the fact that if you as a player see a flash grenade come into your room, you turn directions, you look at a wall, it doesn't have an effect on you. But with Ying's gadget, I don't think that's how that should work, personally. It's just, a flash grenade, what's the difference between Ying's gadget and a flash grenade? Ying's gadget is a little bit more powerful, but it's also her.
It's a really
gadget.
Big flash grenade.
Right. So you look at Habano. We mentioned Habano as the number one on this list. Habano has flash grenades, as well as her gadget that can breach hatches and walls, as well as good weapons, as well as a good secondary. And she's also a 3-speed. So does Ying's gadget really separate itself that far from a flash grenade to justify the rest of her kit not being anywhere close to as good as Habano's?
And does anybody really use like the little cluster timer ability anyway? I find I've just had very relatively limited success with that sort of thing.
Well, the problem with it is you can't do that and enter a room at the same time. Usually you're doing that from above, and so it kind of takes away from getting the kills with it.
And I usually end up flashing my teammates.
Yeah,
because I can't see them.
And the other disadvantage versus regular flash grenades is you can shoot it. If you see that thing rolling in, you can shoot it and destroy it, and it's gone. A flash grenade, you cannot stop. If that's coming in, you can do anything. You can shoot at it, you can throw impact grenades at it. It will not get destroyed. It will continue to go off, and it will stun you.
That might be a good way to do a little fix, is if the ball gets destroyed, that it still goes off.
Yeah.
And it still flashes everywhere. That would then take out any other ADSs in the room, stuff like that. It could be useful.
And maybe even sort of up the spread of those sub-munitions a little bit. So, because I find sometimes, depending on the obstacles within the room, it can be quite unreliable as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's my issue, because it depends on the direction that they're looking. And, honestly, my mindset right now, if a Ying flashes me with her gadget and then kills me, I'm like, GG's, you well-deserved, good job.
Yeah.
I'm not even mad at you, well done. I'm not upset at all. I don't know. I don't want it to get to the point where it's a cheap kill and it's a free kill. It shouldn't be, if you're on a window, you throw one in, there's somebody in a room, it's going to be a free kill. But at this point right now, I just feel like it's a little weak. I don't know.
How about some love for Capital? I didn't suspect he'd be anywhere near as low on this list. When his gadget works, it's really, really strong.
He's got pull weaponry.
Yeah, I think he's basically the opposite of Habana. His weapons aren't good. His gadget is too situational. You got to put yourself at risk to shoot it. It's not.
When he
good
had
at all.
nades, man, he was probably my favorite operator.
Yeah, I never really. That's another thing that really confused me.
Yeah, and with the recent pistol updates, there were only 2 pistols that were nerfed, and Capitao's was one of them. It's now as weak as the 5.7 USG.
He really can't catch a break, can he?
It's weird. He has these horrible primary weapons, and now his secondary is literally one of the worst in the game. Obviously, pistols now are quite decent all around, but he still has the worst, or one of the worst. Alright, and I think with that, I'm going to draw a line under this part of the conversation. We've been going for 45 minutes. That's a good length for a video, right? People love YouTube videos that are 45 minutes or more. And I have to say a massive thank you to all of the viewers who are still with us at this stage. Go into the comment section at the bottom and say I made it. I'll be keeping an eye out for those of you who did, and you definitely deserve an ice cream. A massive thanks once again to Core Ross, Get Flanked, Gregor and Prodigio Pete for joining me today. Links to all of their channels below. And with that guys, as always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video and I will see you in the next episode. Just all sort of on 3 say something like goodbye or something, and then 1, 2, 3.
Deuces.
Later.
Bye.
Adios.
That'll do. All right, yeah,
Don't
cool.
edit that. I want the bit of you prepping us.
Shall I put that in?